good luck for the presentation, but also thank you so much for doing this. And I would like to invite everyone to ask questions in the chat during the meeting, and we will then.
So thanks a lot, Regula. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and you already took the quotation of Eugene Kleiner. That's why the little picture here of the dog eating the dog food. We talk about product market fit today, and this is unfortunately a common mistake or problem that we have in the startup ecosystem. And if you do it completely wrong, it can be very fatal. I'm very happy to be here. Quickly, from my bio, I'm a partner with the Zühlke group. I'm CEO of Zühlke Ventures. If you want to know more about Zühlke Ventures, I have put down the link there. I'm an engineer turned professional VC. I focus on startups, meaning early stage. Beside being a professional VC, I'm also once in a while an independent non-executive director. I'm acting as a coach. I've been founder in the past. And so with this experience, I've seen the journey in, I think it's now about 24 to 25 companies that went from 0 to 1, so from nothing, from an idea to going to market and the first million of revenue. I also have corporate experience in the past, can be quite helpful, especially if you think about M&A processes and exiting. I'm active in the US and Switzerland. And I have a personal homepage, which is called blueprint.ch. You can see the link there as well, where I share topics that I see patterns in the ecosystem where I think, okay, I could share my experience. Check it out if you like to. So today on the menu, what do we have? What I'd like to do is, first of all, talk about the concept of product market fit. What is it? We hear it a lot. We talk about it even more. But the reality is, it's a bit of a fluffy concept. I tried to make it well defined in what I think, based on my experience. And then we have a look at how to integrate this concept in your strategy and in your execution. So first we look at the concept, and then we look at the integration in your daily work. By the way, I think if you would like to have a question during my presentation, just chat it, and then we'll pick it up, and then I'll answer the question during the presentation. I hope we still have the time constraint of an hour. So let's start with the concept. What is actually product market fit? And to build that concept, I'd like to start with the startup playbook. What is a startup? And if I have one slide to explain what a startup is, I show this slide. Basically, you have an idea for a product, you build that product, and once you have the product, you sell it many times. You sell it many times. You sell exactly the same product many times. This is what you call scalability. In scale, you can also have economies of scale, meaning you have lower cost and you have increasing efficiency. The playbook is you build a product and you sell the same product. If you need to build a new product for every customer, you don't run a startup. It won't work. The startup playbook is built on the fact that you build a scalable product. A consultancy, for example, is not a scalable product because for every customer, you have an exactly bespoke solution. Now, selling a product is quite a simple concept. You have your company, which provides value to a customer, and the customer in return pays you. And sounds quite simple, but I think we should go into detail what these topics are. I think the company you know best yourself. There's not much to say about that. But then we can dig in and have a look at value. What is value? And the best way for me to explain is the following. If the customer is happier with your product than without your product, you have created value. So if you delight your customer with your product, you have created value. And the word product is in my terminology here, but the key is not the product. The key is that you make the customer happier. And avoiding pain is value. Pain and value are the two sides of the same coin. And ideally, you start with pain. We'll see later on why pain is important. And so once you have understood where the pain is, you can actually formulate value. And there's two ways of measuring pain. There's measurable pain, mainly cost, time, quality. But there's also emotional pain. There's fear of failure, fear of missing out, low self-esteem, greed, and so forth. In many companies that do B2B, that sell into other companies, you focus on measurable pain. You focus on reducing cost, you focus on reducing time in processes, you focus on improving quality. But of course, emotional pain is also important, specifically if you have a direct-to-consumer products, if you have a social network, these kind of things. TikTok is based on emotional pain. And once you have emotional pain, you can formulate value. So you transform cost in saved cash, in saved money. You speed up time, you speed up processes, or you improve quality. You also translate emotional pain into emotional value, peace of mind, signaling success, signaling power, instant gratification, all these kind of things. And emotional value should not be completely disregarded in B2B sales. To give you an example, if you sell a surgical robot into a hospital, it's quite a signal of success if the head surgeon is able to actually buy one of these robots. So beside the fact that the quality of his work should increase, emotional value is also important. But anyway, so we have here the important point I want to make here is that value is always linked to pain. And if you understand pain, you can formulate value. Okay, that's the value side of things. Now we can have a look at the customer. It's an easy word to say, the customer. But the question is, who is the customer? And in B2C, or direct to consumer, so when you sell directly to a consumer, the customer is generally one person. So it's quite simple. If you provide value to that simple buying center, which is one person, one stakeholder, you can generate value. In a B2B setting or B2B to C, so B2B means business to business and or business to consumer, your customer is a group of stakeholders that influence the sale, the buying center. So it's rarely one person. I say rarely. If you take the example of a dentist, for example, which has her own practice, you are in a B2B setting, but the decision maker often is one person. But anyway, normally in B2B setting, B2B to C setting, the customer is actually a group of stakeholders that influence the sale. And the stakeholders, they can be segmented in different types of stakeholders. You have the user. This is the person that is actually using the product in everyday use. You have the economic buyer. It's the person that owns the budget. It's the person that needs to be convinced that it's worth to be charged on his budget. There's the economic beneficiary. It's the person that's responsible for the financial upside of the buying decision. You have the champions. That's the person or the persons that understand the strategic value of or operational pain. And you have the influencers. Influencers are those that have the power to positively influence champions, economic buyers, economic beneficiaries, or the users. And sometimes you have persons that are multiple of the stakeholders. Sometimes the economic buyer and the economic beneficiary is the same person, and sometimes it's not. For example, in the medtech space, often the economic buyer charges their budget, but at the same time, the economic beneficiary is not the same person that was charged the budget. Champions, for example, are, if you would sell a robot into a manufacturing line, is the responsible for the complete manufacturing line. It's the person that understands, yeah, we are too slow, we are too expensive. But then the user is really the guy on the floor. It's the person that needs to work with the robot. So in B2B, it's always, not always, almost always a complex buying center, and it's a group of stakeholders that have different intentions and different goals. And if you have one stakeholder that is vetoing the sale, it's often enough to lose the sale. So you need to focus on the full buying center. It's not enough to focus on one. By the way, influencers, they can be within the company, for example, a board member or a shareholder, but they often are outside the company. Again, in the medtech space or in the pharmaceutical space, these are key opinion leaders. These are, for example, researchers in well-known universities that have an opinion what works and doesn't. So again, stakeholders are important, and if one stakeholder vetoes the buying decision, then you lose the sale. And that's why you should be very carefully and putting up a document where you describe the pain and the associated value proposition for each stakeholder of the buying center. In my experience, it's a very good tool to have this ideal customer profile, because if you work in this document and if you work on understanding the various incentivations and motivations of the various stakeholders, it really helps you understand the dynamics of it. And having worked in this type of document helps you to change if you need to change. So it's not so much about being right, but it's very much about doing the right thing by setting up this type of ICP, ideal customer profile. If you have an ideal customer profile that doesn't apply to all of your customers, you have a problem. Or in other words, your business only scales if you have enough potential customers that actually correspond to your ideal customer profile. Because the dollar sum of all customers that correspond to your ideal customer profile correspond to your serviceable market. So that means that the ideal customer profile needs to be general enough to allow you to reach many customers, but it needs to be specific enough to be able to have a focused, targeted product development of a well-defined product. And here we go to the last point of this sales transaction. We have created value, we have understood our customer, and now the customer is returning us some money. And basically returning money is a way of capturing value. And that's why we talk about the business model here. And there's three components in the business model. There's the flow of money. So who pays whom until the money reaches your account? How much is the customer willing to pay for the value? And how do you generate revenue? And in revenue generation, you have basically three models. You have one-off revenue. So the customer pays you one single time, value is received, one payment, that's it, end of transaction. Or you have recurring revenue. And recurring revenue can happen if they pay per use. So every time they use the product, they pay. Or it's fee per time. It's a classic subscription or a rent. So to give some meat on the bone here, you can always combine one-off revenue and recurring revenue. That's the classic Gillette case, you know, the razor blade case. You buy the razor once, and then you continue to buy per use the blades. It's a very old concept, but this is really the combination of one-off and recurring revenue. Also, you can combine one-off sales of a hardware, for example, and the data that you generate with that hardware in a medical setting, you provide to the customer as a fee per time, as a subscription. And so again, you have combined a hardware sale with a SaaS, or software as a service subscription model. So you can really combine those models of how you generate revenue. Flow of money, to come back to the first point, is an important one when you have, especially in medical and pharma, because you have complex reimbursement channels where you have to understand, okay, who is paying whom for what value. And flow of money is totally underestimated. Do that very, very diligently and try to understand where does the money flow, at what point. So, and there we have it. This is basically understanding these things helps you understand product market fit. Because if you understand the things that delight your customer, the sum of value propositions that the customer likes, if you understand what business model is attractive for your customer, and if the features of your product are actually able to deliver the value propositions and are able to capture the value according to your business model, then you have product market fit. It's quite simple, actually. So it's really what is coming together is value proposition, business model, and features of the product. And this is indeed what Eugene Kleiner already coined many, many years ago. Eugene Kleiner is the founder of Kleiner Perkins Caulfield Byers, the prototype of the Silicon Valley Venture Capital Fund. He used to say, make sure the dog wants to eat the dog food. That's exactly it. So the dog wants to eat the dog food if the dog understands that they like the food. And for that, you need a value proposition, a business model that works, and the features of your product need to deliver the value proposition. This sounds almost too simple to be true. In reality, having features of the product delivering exactly the right value propositions is exactly where the problem is. This is really where the problem is. And so we're already at the point where we can start to think about how to integrate the concept of product market fit in strategy and execution. And there I'd like to start with a quote that is several hundred years old. I didn't know. Proof of the pudding is in the eating. You know, the only way to validate if your understanding of product market fit is correct, the only way to do that is actually to start selling the product. And this is a problem, because the problem is that often you need quite a lot of money to actually come up with a scalable product. So you burn cash to develop the product, make it available as a prototype, develop a system that's able to scale the product, and only then you have it available at scale, and only then you can sell it to your customers, and only then you actually have the proof of the pudding. You will understand at that moment in time if you were right or not. So this is a problem, because you're always at risk. Even if you try to be diligent, you're always at risk that you're wrong at launch. And this is inherent in the system. And now the question is, okay, what can we do? I mean, we can't change that, but what can we do? What can we do to reduce the probability or the risk that you're wrong at that moment in time? And so the first thing we can look at is how can you reduce the probability to fail product market fit at launch? And the first thing to consider is really starting at the product development level. And the key at that point is really to understand the pain. And I made the point before, I really insist on understanding pain, because customers are reliable articulating pain, but customers are totally unreliable to articulate value. And this is already Ford understood that when he came up with his first T model. When was it? In the 20s, I think. Because I think I'm butchering his quote, but he seemed to have said, if I would have asked my customer what they wanted, it's like 2 more horses or something. And in reality, they wanted a car. And this is exactly the point. Customers understand where things don't work. Customers understand where they have pain. Customers understand the problem because they're struggling with the problems. And if they would have the capacity and the time and the resources or the education to solve the problem, they would have done it. And so generating a value proposition is your job. Formulating a value proposition is your job. And understanding the pain is also your job. And you have to do that very early on, really at day 0, from day 1. Talk to many prospective customers before you start developing your product. Try to get an understanding why there are problems, and find the root cause of pain. Drill down. And as an engineer, I really like the Toyota way. Toyota way is a lean manufacturing principle invented in the 60s, I think, by a guy at Toyota. And he has this 5 whys process. It's really understanding. If you hit the problem, ask 5 times why, and then you start to drill down at the root cause of the pain. So to sum up this slide, really, you have to start working on product market fit at launch. At start of the company, at the level where you start developing the product. And it's all based on pain, because your customer understands pain. And hence the quote of Yuri Levine, he's the founder of Waze, when he said, fall in love with the problem and not the solution. And I fully subscribe to that quote. And this is really, really helpful to be successful. I wrote an extra slide. I forgot I wrote that one, but it's your job to articulate value proposition. And the value proposition has a direct link to the development of the product. For us techies out there, the formulation of value proposition is the basis or the requirement specification or the user story for your tech team to start developing the product. the customer should be in the lead of product development and not the technology. And by the way, we are all too often guilty of being in love with our solution. We find a fantastic technology, or we find surprising results, and we have this idea for new intellectual property. And we believe that this is so exciting, our customer must understand this technology and must be happy to buy this technology. And this rarely happens. You do find a few early adopters. You do find a few crazy customers that might buy your product based on the newness of the technology, but this is just early adopters. That's a very small share of your customer base. And there's a great book that's called Crossing the Chasm that goes really very much into detail with regard to this topic. Now, another way to reduce probability to fail product market fit at launch is really to involve your customer in the development of the product. So once you have a product available as a prototype, we could discuss what a prototype is, but let's assume you have something that the customer can use. Involve prospective customers at prototype level. You will have to make sure that the customer understands that they are now part of an innovation effort. They have to understand that this is not a product that's available at scale, but involve the customers and make it kind of a program that you can sell. So I've had a lot of success the last few years to actually at that level provide access to prospective customers at very early stage. We even give it a name, and we sell that access to the customer. They understand that they are still part of an innovation effort, but often customers see value in being part of such an early access program for a number of reasons. And for you, it's really important to kind of pre-check if your product market fit is on the right path. And very often you actually start to realize at this level that you have to readjust. You might even have to go back and change your product before you go into full scale. So try to involve your customer as soon as possible and make it the program that you can sell to your customer. And so we talk now about how to reduce the probability that you're wrong at launch. But what we can also do is reduce the impact of a failed product market fit at launch. And the only way to reduce the impact of being wrong is by burning less or by moving fast. So if you don't spend 5 years to come up with something that no one wants, if you only spend 2 months and you almost burn no money, it's not such a big harm, because you haven't involved too many investors and you haven't created a lot of damage. So you have to try to reduce cash burn and to move as quickly as possible. And there's only one way to do that, and the way is focus. You really have to try to reduce to the max what you work on as a product. And that's where the concept of minimally viable product comes from. So if you work on your first product, so that's the one that you go to market with, we call it a minimally viable product. You focus on value propositions that seem to be the most important one to your customers, or you focus on value propositions that you can achieve fast and with less burn. And once you have that, you can add product expansions. And it doesn't matter how many expansions you already have done to your product. Every time you expand your product and start the cycle again, the nth time, you need to focus again. Try to minimize the burn and try to minimize the time it takes to develop the product. So we talked about how we can reduce the impact of a failed product market fit. We have talked about how you can reduce the probability that you're actually wrong. But still, it will happen that you're going to be wrong. And I would say in my experience, probably 80 to 85% of all companies are actually wrong at at launch. So some a bit more, some a bit less, but you're going to be somewhat wrong. And now the question is, how do you react on that? And you realize that your sales don't grow as much as you want them, if you realize that your adoption is not as good as it should be, what do you do then? The classic reaction, knee-jerk reaction in boards and in founder teams is, okay, we have to rebuild the product. This is one way to react. I'm not saying this is wrong, but the point is, if you rebuild your product, you have to restart an R&D and a scale-up cycle. And so there's other ways to actually change product market fit. You can, for example, change the business model. And I've seen that happen in the past. We've realized that an insufficient product market fit was actually driven by the wrong business model. So we changed a pure one-off business model to a one-off business model with subscription fee, and that unlocked the customer. So thinking about the business model can literally unlock customers. Don't forget that. The other possibility is to change the ideal customer profile. So having a product that you don't touch, you leave it as is, you might be able to find a different group of customers, a different type of ideal customer profile that actually matches on your product. And again, this is much less costly than actually redeveloping and remaking your product. And with this, we're at the end of my presentation, and I would like to do the summary of what we saw today. So the concept is simple. Product market fit is really the junction where value proposition, business model, and your product, the features of the product, come together. The features deliver the value proposition that the customer expects, and the business model is a way to capture value that fits the customer. From day one, you should fall in love with the problem and not the solution. It's hard. I'm an engineer myself. I did a PhD in engineering. I know what I'm talking about. I'm an absolute tech geek. I love technology. But if you want to do business, you have to fall in love with the problem and not the solution. Involve your prospective customers before a hard launch. Try to come up with an early adopter program. Try to sell to the customer that they can be part of an innovation effort. The 3 Fs, focus, focus, focus. Every requirement, every value proposition that you don't have to develop doesn't cost you anything. Every requirement you don't have to develop doesn't take any time. So you have to be really focused on what your first product and any iteration that follows thereafter is really doing. And that's an extremely, extremely hard part in the psyche and in the group dynamics of a founder team. Because maybe you will launch a product that only utilizes 10% of what a technology could deliver. But if your success of the company depends on that, you have to do that. And if PMF fails, if product market fit fails, change in this order of priority. First, look at the business model. Is something wrong with our business model? If you can fix that, you can fix it really quickly. Doesn't take much time. If that's not the problem, change the ideal customer profile. So keep the value, try to keep the product, but change the value proposition for a different type of customer. And the last thing you should change is the product itself, because it's costly, takes time, and it's the biggest of these three efforts. So with that, I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'm very happy to take your questions or start a discussion.
I have a question, Patrick. I mean, how or what methods do you see to measure product market fit?
Very good question. So if you enter the market and your sales don't take off and your adoption doesn't take off, it can be product market fit, but it can be other things as well. It can be insufficient sales ability, or it can be insufficient marketing activity. It can be the three of those. So marketing is basically generating leads, and sales is closing leads. So whatever you measure, you have to be able to separate those three things. But classically, the obvious ones, I mean, the obvious ones is really lack of adoption, just sales that don't grow. And what I expect in a go-to-market, in a company that's okay, is 6% month on month, or which corresponds to doubling in a year, 100% in a year. If you're above, you overperform the median. If you're below, you have to reconsider. You don't grow fast enough.
Okay, thanks.
And then there's another, there's a more refined one, which now enters also into willingness to pay and kinds of things, but it's what some people call unit economics, and that I define as estimated customer lifetime divided by the cost of revenue. And so if you see that your cost of revenue is suddenly dominated, or your unit economics is reduced by excessive customer acquisition cost, that's another indicator. That's the rough ones.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you very much for thank you for the insights. I would love to ask you, I think in AI products, so we have some very difficult challenges when it comes to product market fit. So long development times, difficulties to do MVPs due to cold start problems. We have very fast changing tech possibilities to develop the product, and very fast changing markets. Do you have some sources or ideas how to tackle, specifically in the field of AI, these problem market fit situations or
specifically on AI? I don't actually, because it's for me personally, it's quite a recent topic. So I've invested in my first AI company, what was it, 4 years ago or something like that. So AI, I don't have a lot of data, but it's specifically also in your case. I mean, you know, scalability is also a topic, and I would, in any comparably to AI, I would say health tech or medical devices are also very tough, because things change very quickly there as well. And in addition, you have a tremendously heavy regulation, and so you have to feed through this maze of minefield or mines that you have. And so the key, I think, is to involve your customers, to really drag your customer into early access programs. And in complex situations like health tech, this is really something that works very, very well, because the customers often really like to be part of a innovation effort, because they often have the need themselves that they need to signal that they are moving. And so being part of something like that is actually signaling to their market that they're part of the bleeding edge.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I will have a closer look how the health tech guys are doing that.
I have a question, Patrick.
Yes.
Well, thanks for this very enlightening talk. I have a question around this approach, fake it till you make it. Finding product market fit, as you said, and I didn't think about it before like that, is very expensive if you invest in the first MVP and then you figure out that this is not what the customer wants. So if I would just launch a website where I offer my services or my value proposition, as you named it, and people buy it via the purchasing button, and I then deliver the solution manually without any automation, just by doing it with a lot of workload, I'll figure it out without investing into the MVP, whether I'm offering the right value proposition. What do you think about this approach as an engineer, but more important for me as an investor? Because I can definitely sell something which is much cheaper in the market than and do it manually, but I'm having very expensive unit economics. But with that knowledge, I can develop an automated product and then later on turn profitable.
So first of all, fake it until you make it. It's if you use this term, it can be, depending on who you are, this means different things.
Yeah.
I think if you take fake it until you make it as a very quick iteration of coming up with a value proposition, testing it, we're wrong, and you go back, that's fine. As long as you're authentic, you need to be authentic, because the customer, especially the customer starts to understand very quickly if you're not authentic. And so that's why if fake it until you make it means you kind of wiggle yourselves through and you're not entirely honest with your customer, I'm totally against it. I'm totally against it. But if it means that you iterate quickly, I'm fully for it. Number one. Number two is you cannot simulate the buying decision of the customer. You cannot simulate it. What you can do is you can understand your customer's problem at the beginning of the process. That's quite reliable, because that depends on your technique of how you talk to people. And then there's techniques. And as I said, the customers are very reliable talking about their problems. But that's it. Once you're on the way and you formulate your value propositions, the only way to test it is to do the sale. You cannot simulate the sale. And so if you're, and as far as I understand, your proposal now would be to say, okay, we can basically automate that cycle from testing a value proposition, we're wrong, and then you're going back. If you manage to automate that somehow, why not?
I was thinking I'm selling. Somebody buys the offering, and instead of using software to get the results done, I'm doing it manually. Think about DevOps work.
Yes, of course.
Only then I learn what the customer really wants, where is the price point, and then start developing the software once I have enough data points.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fully allowed. That's smart, actually. Again, the features of your product are totally how you achieve these features. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can, whatever it takes to deliver the feature that enables the value proposition. And if in a low scale, this is people churning Excel sheets, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
And you as an investor, how many of those purchases would you like to see to fund, let's say, an MVP development? Just to go in as a lean data testing, and then once we go into development, what would be a sufficient set of data points where you would say, I'm interested in funding that MVP? So the patterns that I see. So first of all, for me, we invest pre go to market. So we are pre go to market. So we are taking the risk of product development. So we go in exceedingly early, seed, pre-seed. So, but that's us. And there's a number of investors in Switzerland. There's not that many, not many professionals. Yeah. What I see happening is the number of 1 million revenue, where people start to become comfortable. It's a number that has popped up over the last maybe 2 years or something. We want to see 1 million revenue. And so does that make sense? I don't know. Is that a lot of money? Yes. 1 million revenue is a lot of money. And so I think there's now a counter tendency where people start to realize, okay, if I have to wait for 1 million revenue in Switzerland, I've run out of deal flow. So it comes down again. Interesting.
And in the US, it's a different story. In the US, it's a totally different story. Yeah.
No, thank you. That helps a lot.
I think I saw a question in the chat. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Patrick.
But I cannot access it somehow. Can you read it, Regula?
Of course. It's a question from Michael. I don't mean to offend anyone, but it seems to me that this is a slippery slope. Some startups generate a lot of buzz this way via faking it and even attract investor capital, and they end up faking it much, much longer than would be considered healthy or acceptable among more mature / more, or in brackets, more established companies.
Yeah, that's why I don't like the term fake it until you make it. But to have a technology that is delivering the value proposition doesn't depend on the technology. And as long as you are switching soon enough to remain scalable and have costs under control, you're fine. And the slippery slope will come mainly on the cost side and the scalability side, because you cannot remain in that mode very long, because it will just, your unit economics is going to be really bad.
We have another question in the chat from Philip. It says, thanks, Patrick, for the valuable summary on this topic. Similarly to the concept of a product market fit, do you also analyze so-called startup exit fit? If so, which is more important to you as an investor?
Yes, we analyze. To have an idea what the exit will look like for a particular company is an important assessment if you invest or not, or if we invest or not. But it's the way we go about it is to try to understand which markets out there are growing at the moment, because that's an indicator for where things happen, number one. And then number two, we try to analyze which of the classic corporations that could be buying startups actually have a white spot in those growing markets. And that's a very, very rough assessment of if a company is exitable or not, just from a strategic point of view. And if we think that there's something to be had, then we invest. And if we think that there's nothing to be had, then we don't. And that's an indicator. Now, the reality is once you're 5 to 10 years down the road, the world is going to look different again. And there's so many indicators that are more important than your strategic assessment in reality is also a fact. But we do look at that, and it's kind of, I look at it that way. It's not about finding the right company that has the right exit strategy or opportunity potential. It's more about, okay, this one for sure doesn't have one. So you can't find opportunity. You can only rule out the red flags.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Patrick, I have a question for you. Now that you've shared a lot of your knowledge, do you have any, like, the biggest mistakes that you've seen with all the companies that you've sort of accompanied on their journeys? Are there any like 3 learnings or so that you say, absolutely do not do this, or something to say, you must do that, just in addition to your presentation?
Really, I mean, number 1 is keep that quote in your mind: the dog needs to eat the dog food, and you cannot ask the dog what food he likes. So that's number 1. And the other one is fall in love with the problem and not the solution. That is, if this is already half of the bill. If you're aware of that, that's number 1. Number 2, I have to be a little bit careful with examples. I don't have any example yet where I'm really allowed to talk about. I hope this will come in the future because it is really, really valuable. But one example is I've invested in a company where we had tremendously successful technology in the research community. People were they were excited about the technology that we invested in. And then we developed the product, and then we wanted to move the product into the clinic. And we realized the clinic doesn't care. The clinic didn't care because the responsible physician in real everyday life had completely different problems than actually using that technology. And that's a classical mistake of falling in love with the technology and not the solution. And in this case, it was very hard to pivot the company. In another case, and that's quite common actually in pharma business cases and I would say IVD, is that you come up with you find a technology, you can make a case for clinics or clinical use, and you realize, you know what, the first market is actually in research use. And so the company starts with clinical use, starts to slowly shift to research use, and in the end, all of the sales, the whole company is in research, and you exit in research. So this is really, again, you kind of, your ICP changes. It's not a clinical customer, it's a research customer.
Thank you so much for the insights. I think we have about 3 more minutes left. Any other questions? Doesn't seem so. So otherwise, I would ask Patrick, are we allowed to share your presentation with the participants? Yes. Wonderful. We're going to do that. We'll send everyone a follow-up email, and please, we'll also add Patrick's contacts to it. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, and we'll also share the Blueprint webpage with the email. So Patrick, thank you so much for partnering up with us, for supporting us, and for all these insights. I always really enjoy the conversations and learnings with you and from you. And we hope to be able to host you again in the future after you're able to share all the learnings. And thanks everyone for joining, for giving up the lunch break, and we'll wish you a great rest of the week. And all the best, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Regula. It was a pleasure. Thanks for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.